given that it is spread more evenly, does that mean we should be less concerned? Is it easier to contain? Or, I mean, it seems more likely you could contain it if it was all in one place.
So, yeah, it can be a bit misleading, difficult to interpret, but realistically, at this point in the UK, because it is small numbers of cases in isolated areas around the country, that's a pattern that sort of matches that cases are coming from abroad, they're being caught when they arrive in the UK and causing small clusters that we can then sort of trace back, quarantine and contain. So that's actually a good thing. The longer that it stays like that, the better. Well, what will really be the sort of tipping point for the UK moving into the next stage will be something like we have seen in northern Italy, where you suddenly have a lot of cases in one area and you start getting community spread. So that's when you can't trace cases back to someone who's been to another affected area recently. And when things just start spreading at that high level in an area, that's when you have to stop thinking about containment and start thinking about other measures.
Are we testing enough in this country?
The testing procedures have been pretty good so far. It's been over 20,000, hasn't it? It might even be 25,000 now. And I know that yesterday they broadened some of the testing guidelines. So, for example, hospitals have only been testing people with the symptoms in intensive care units, but I think from today that's going to be people with the symptoms in A&E as well, with severe respiratory problems. At the moment, though, the advice still is that if you have any of the symptoms, which are very broad, it can just be a runny nose, but if you have any of those symptoms, you still shouldn't really actually get tested unless there is reason to believe that you've come into contact with someone who's been in an affected area, or you have yourself, because we're not really at the point yet, we think, that there's community spread.
Thank you very much. Dr. Penny Sarche, who's news editor at The New Scientist. 11 minutes past 8.
Sean Farrington, you've been keeping an eye on the stock exchange. It's been open just over 10 minutes now. How's it looking?
It's much calmer this morning than it was this time yesterday morning. So the FTSE 100 share index, which is 100 biggest companies listed on the stock market, is up 1.5%. Now, put that in perspective. Beginning of the year, the FTSE 100 was around 7,500, the value of it. Yesterday morning, before the stock market opened, it was about 6,500, so we'd already had a big fall. And then yesterday, it went from 6,500 to below 6,000. That was that big fall, one of the biggest on record. And so when you see a little bounce back, like 1 or 2% the next day, it's not much in the grand scheme of things. So you're still looking at the FTSE 100 right now, 6,055 is the mark, which is a lot lower, not far off 20% lower than it was at the beginning of the year.
All right, thank you, Sean.
Now, what would you do if you had a holiday book? This is a dilemma facing a lot of people at the moment. There is a school of thought that says, come on, it's just a holiday, it's not important, cancel it. But if you cancel it, this might be a holiday of a lifetime you've saved for months, possibly years. You're not going to get any money back because the Foreign and Commonwealth Office hasn't said that you shouldn't travel to that area. It is a genuine dilemma for people. Earlier we spoke to Catherine Attridge. Now, her parents are in Vietnam and they have tested positive for coronavirus. They think they contracted it on the flight on the way over. And she says people should think twice about getting on flights.
I really want to take this opportunity to urge people who are flying out on holiday, who are looking at their destination, where they're going, and saying it's fine, to really think about getting on that plane, because it's not about where you're going, it's about who you're flying with. And although Mum and Dad said they were asked, have they been to, all the affected areas, presumably this woman that they know had brought the virus onto the plane was asked the same things. It does look like she has flown around Europe before boarding the flight at London Heathrow and flying with my mum and dad and over 200 other people, and created this disaster for me and my family.
Now, Ben Clatworthy is assistant travel editor at the Times, at the Sunday Times. Good morning, Ben. The situation has changed in terms of the Foreign Office advice with regards to Italy.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's remarkable to see an entire country go down into lockdown in the way that Italy has. And the FCO here, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, had very little option but to follow and change their advice and say, actually, now we do advise against all but essential travel to Italy, not only because of the widespread number of cases in the country, but also because it is possible that once you're there, getting in and leaving is going to be very difficult.
So, I noticed this morning a lot of flights were still going between the UK and Italy. If you're not booked on a package trip or you don't have travel insurance, will your airline refund you?
Airlines are being very sympathetic across the board, not just to Italy, but with flights in general. They are being sympathetic. They understand that at the moment there are people who will not want to be flying, and there are people who are working for companies, for example, that are saying, actually, we're suspending all non-essential work travel, and they will be looking to change their bookings, move them forward, maybe for when the outbreak is less bad and people are ready to travel again. So in the first instance, do call your airline if you're not booked on a package holiday. You're likely to find that they are being sympathetic, waiving cancellation fees and making it easier to change flights.
And with that Foreign Office advice, if you are on a package holiday or if you have travel insurance, you will be able to claim it back.
So if you're booked on a package holiday, the tour operator you are going with will have three options. This is if you're travelling to Italy. That's either to give you a full refund, offer you an alternative holiday, or allow you to delay your departure date for some time in the future when hopefully Italy will be back on the green list at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. If you are a independent traveller, the first thing to do, as we said, is to speak to your airline. If you have travel insurance, it may come in handy because it may be that your hotels, for example, in Italy, are still actually open and accepting guests. They say, sorry, our cancellation fees still apply. That's when you would then go to your insurer. Also for consequential losses such as hire cars and so on, that's where your travel insurance comes in. And if you are booking a trip, not necessarily anywhere in the world at the moment, take out travel insurance as soon as you press the button to buy the holiday, because it's in situations like this where before you may even have travelled, you could be travelling to Italy in a few weeks' time, and actually you're now relying on your travel insurance to pick up the losses.
Because we've seen things escalate very quickly in Italy. Really, just over the last couple of days, we saw that quarantine in the north, and now the whole country on lockdown. What if you had a trip planned to another country, and you're concerned actually by the time you get there, or by the time you get a couple of days into your trip, you could end up under quarantine and stuck there?
Well, actually, that's talking to tour operators and travel agents in the last couple of weeks. One of the big things we're hearing from customers and clients of theirs is not, as you say, about going on holiday. People are willing to travel. It's the fear of once they get there of being locked down. I think the examples on the cruise ships and also the hotel in Tenerife is a stark reminder that actually most people don't want to be sitting in a hotel room with foreign television for 14 days in isolation. It's totally understandable that you would be concerned about that. I mean, when I was first talking about coronavirus a month and a half ago, and China was imposing these measures, we were saying, well, it's amazing. Only a country like China would be able to turn around to their citizens and say, right, this is forced quarantine. And now Italy's done it. It's quite remarkable. So it is very scary. And hearing Rory Stewart call earlier on this programme for Britain to take similar measures to China, I can see why people would be fearful at the moment of getting on a plane for fear of being locked down.
Ben Clutchworthy from the Times and Sunday Times, thank you so much. We're going to be talking in a few minutes to John and Irene Hayes, who run Hayes Travel. And if you really want to wrap your head around the coronavirus, because as we've been talking about this morning, there's a lot of misinformation on social media. 5 Live have got an excellent podcast. It really is good if you just want to familiarise yourself with what it is, what the fears are around it, what is founded, what's unfounded, and what would a lockdown mean, for example. It's called the Coronavirus Podcast, and you can find it on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts from. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live on digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
And if that wasn't enough to be dealing with of a morning, the weather's miserable, Simon.
Yeah, it has been
seen, we've had some very wet conditions throughout yesterday afternoon and through the night across parts of Wales and the northwest of England. Some pretty nasty conditions on the roads this morning. Now, that rain is going to clear away gradually. So for Scotland, for Northern Ireland and Northern England, we're looking at sunny spells and showers into the afternoon. So certainly a bit drier than it's been so far this morning. Quite blustery conditions, particularly over the Pennines, because it goes up to 50-55 miles an hour, but quite mild. Temperatures 10 to 14 degrees. Across Wales, the Midlands, eastern and through southern areas of England, it'll stay fairly cloudy. There'll still be some outbreaks of rain at times, I think, for South Wales in particular. And again, quite blustery conditions over the Welsh hills. Maximum temperatures about 14 to 16, maybe even 17 degrees. So that's on the mild, if not warm side of things.
On the roads. Well, quite a lot of wet weather out there today, so it's been affecting the motorways very, very slow. We've got lots of lane closures in patches. The M57, all traffic was held on Merseyside. That was on the northbound side. At Junction 6 at Kirby, they've just released it now. The vehicles are on the hard shoulder. The M42 in Leicestershire, heading south, 11, Burton-upon-Trent. Emergency repairs and a lane closed. And in the West Midlands, the M42 has a lane closed southbound to an accident at Solihull at Junction 5. And in Warwickshire, southbound, approaching the M40, 40-minute delays there still. After the earlier breakdown, all lanes open. M3 and southbound at the M25, there's a breakdown in one of the lanes. M25 clockwise at 16 to the M40, the accident's been moved, but long delays on the western stretch. Anti-clockwise queues as well, 14 to 12 for the M3 after an accident. Anti-clockwise at 21 at the M1, the accident on the hard shoulder, again long delays anti-clockwise. And the M4 at Bridgend, eastbound, 35 at Pencoed, an accident there. Vehicles now on the hard shoulder, half an hour delays. And as you've been hearing, so many flights have been cancelled now. If you're heading to Italy or you were due to fly to Italy, check ahead. You may find that some of these flights have gone, so it is a little bit misleading, but it just seems to be now that the cancellations are coming in thick and fast. That the advice is to check with your airline, and also the Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to Italy anyway, so just to give you a heads up on that. Trains-wise, we're not doing well. Overhead line problems still going on between London Euston and Watford Junction, and that's affecting all train companies, and London Overground as well between Willesden and Watford Junction. I want to mention 5 Live Travel.
Across the UK, this is BBC 5 Live. 5 Live Breakfast.
And with everything else going on, hard to believe perhaps that we are just over 5 hours away from the Cheltenham Roar, the eruption of noise ahead of the first race of Jump Racing's 4-day festival, which is going ahead despite being under the shadow of coronavirus. Chris, a lot of people feel this is all about the bookies and their money. But I guess they are following the advice the government is giving, and at the moment, you know, big gatherings out in the fresh air still all right.
Yeah, jury's out whether I'll go with my own underlying health condition. I was speaking to my doctor this week about whether or not we go, because I was going to go for work.
Yeah.
So that's a very real concern for me, and other people will be in a similar boat. But yeah, as we stand, we're going ahead, and Cornelius was saying that people are really looking forward to it. Now, there's a couple of really good storylines are bubbling away this week, including Rachel Blackmore, who last year rode a couple of festival winners at Cheltenham. This year, she's third favourite to be the leading jockey.
Manila Endo it is, 2 or 3 lengths clear. Manila Endo, Rachel Blackmore, who may well be champion jockey in Ireland this season, gets her second win of the meeting.
A Cheltenham winner brings a whole different spectrum of things. Like even with, say, girls I would have went to school with who don't know anything about racing, to be able to say I rode a winner in Cheltenham, you know, they all know Cheltenham is on.
Yes, we all know Cheltenham is on. 28 races across 5 Live and Sports Extra. That was Rachel Blackmore, who goes on the favourite in the Arkle Chase at 2:10 Notebook. No woman has ever topped the standings as the leading jockey at the end of a Cheltenham festival week. Let's speak to someone who knows a thing or two about winning at Cheltenham. Lizzie Kelly. Hi, Lizzie.
Morning, how are you?
I'm really well. How are you doing on the first morning of Cheltenham Festival? Some butterflies brewing away, I imagine?
Yeah, a little bit, but I'm not racing until Thursday, so I've got a couple of days to soak up the atmosphere while I'm there. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, alongside the 5 Live team as well. Now, we just heard from Rachel Blackmore. How significant would it be for racing, for women jockeys, if she could end the year as either the end of the week rather, as either the leading jockey or with a Gold Cup in her back pocket?
Yeah, it would be great, obviously. Yeah, brilliant.